Johnny Sports Network here to provide you with some additional Week 1 college football predictions. And this is the debut of a new weekly segment for this season, the Best of the Rest. And our first game of the Best of the Rest for this week, a game that will be on Thursday, late afternoon, early evening, number 25 Boise State and South Florida. Returning starters, Boise State with 14, South Florida with 16. For Boise State, the big storyline going into this game is how are they going to look at the start of this 2025 season post Ashton Jeanty. As when we look at the losses from these two teams from a year ago, Boise State has the biggest loss. On a positive note for Boise State, they returned 4 of their 5 leading tacklers from a year ago. South Florida in these last couple of seasons, they have held their own against some top 25 competition. Last season against Miami, they had the lead at one point in that game toward the middle of the second quarter, but then Miami, they started to pull away in that game. Alabama last season, they had the lead in the fourth quarter, but then as the fourth quarter went along, Alabama, they started to look like the Alabama team that we had gotten used to seeing under Nick Saban. And even back in 2023 against Alabama, South Florida was competitive in that game as well, and the field was very sloppy that day. And it's possible that it's going to be a sloppy field as well for this game, as there is a 40% chance of rain around the time the game begins when I last checked the weather report. So I think that is going to play in South Florida's favor. South Florida quarterback Byron Brown, a quarterback that I don't think gets a lot of recognition at all. But if he has a good performance in this game, then I think a lot more people will start talking about him, as he is a great runner. And I do think that this is a trap game for Boise State. South Florida, I think, has a strong chance of pulling off this upset. But I think Boise State, they still win the game. But I think South Florida, they cover that 5.5, as it was 6 points at the beginning of the week, but it's gone down to 5.5. And I wouldn't be surprised if it went down to 5 points by game time. Boise State wins this game by a field goal, I'm going to predict. Up next, we have Georgia Tech and Colorado on Friday night, and this is a big season for both teams. For Georgia Tech, we have seen them be fairly inconsistent in the last couple of seasons. We've seen them pull off upsets, but we've also seen them get upset. And this could be potentially a season where Georgia Tech, they have a breakout season. We've seen in the last few seasons many teams fly under the radar, and Georgia Tech this season, they could be one of those candidates that we see fly completely under the radar. As people I've seen criticize the ACC being a weak conference, but I think the ACC is going to be a lot more competitive this season than a lot of people believe. And for Colorado, year 3 with Deion Sanders, the first season without Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter. Colorado will be starting Liberty transfer Caden Salter at quarterback. In this matchup, we have 2 experienced quarterbacks. For Georgia Tech, Haynes King, last season, completed just under 73% of his passes. Running back Jamal Haynes for the Yellow Jackets, 944 rushing yards and 9 touchdowns last year. As far as returning starters, Georgia Tech with 14, Colorado with 11. And this matchup for me, it's based off of the more experienced quarterback in this game. While both quarterbacks are experienced, Haynes King has played way more tougher competition than Caden Salter has. And I do think that that is the difference in this game. However, I do find the current point spread of 4.5 points in Georgia Tech's favor to be a little suspicious. Because throughout the offseason, it's been between 3 and 3.5, but now it's up to 4.5. But I do think that with these two experienced quarterbacks, I really do think that this has the potential of being a high-scoring game. But I'm going to pick Georgia Tech, as I think Haynes King will be able to make plays down the stretch when it matters. And I do think Georgia Tech will win by a touchdown, so I do have them covering that 4.5 points. Up next, we have Syracuse and number 24 Tennessee in Atlanta. Syracuse was one of several teams that had a breakout season that we did not see coming. A 10-win season for the Orange last year, but they lost quarterback Kyle McCord and their top 3 wide receivers from a year ago. In fact, only 8 returning starters for the Orange. They named Steve Angeli, the Notre Dame transfer, as their starting quarterback over Ricky Collins. And we saw Steve Angeli in the semifinals against Penn State toward the end of the first half when Riley Leonard was being evaluated for a concussion. And he did what he had to do. He managed the game. He did not surrender any momentum, not allowing Penn State to get any momentum before the half. Didn't make a crucial mistake. For Tennessee, their offseason was really dramatic. Nico Iamaleava transfers to UCLA over an NIL dispute. They picked up Joey Aguilar from App State in the transfer portal. And I have seen a lot of people say that Joey Aguilar, that he's not going to be that good this season. Tennessee just grabbed him as a desperate need. But I don't think that's the case. I think he's going to surprise people, not only in this game, but throughout the season. Tennessee does return 13 starters from a year ago, 8 on the defense, from a team that made the playoff last season, but ended up losing on the road to Ohio State in the first round, who eventually won the national championship. Under Josh Heupel, Tennessee is 4-0 against ACC opponents. And I've seen some people call for the upset for this game, but I just don't know why. I think that Tennessee is going to win this game by at least 17 points. For starters, Tennessee's 4-0 record under Josh Heupel against the ACC. Plus, it's in Atlanta, maybe a neutral site, but Atlanta is SEC territory. And there's going to be a lot more Tennessee fans and Syracuse fans at that game. It's going to essentially be a Tennessee home game, and I'm going to go with the Vols to win by at least 17 points. Up next, we have Utah and UCLA. And this game, at least for me, it's going to have a pretty nostalgic feel to it, because this game is going to be at 11 p.m. Eastern Time. And it's going to feel like Pac-12 after dark again. And both of these teams, they are looking to respond to a 5-7 year last season. Utah started last season 4-0. Then they went on a 7-game losing streak to finish the year 5-7. While UCLA, they started last season 1-5. But then they started to get momentum toward the end of the season to finish with a 5-7 record. Utah with 17 returning starters, UCLA with 11. The big news of the offseason for UCLA, acquiring Tennessee transfer quarterback Nico Iamaleava in the transfer portal. Utah, they acquired New Mexico transfer quarterback Devin Dampier. Devin Dampier was a first-team Mountain West last season. And one thing I also want to note is UCLA, they lost their 11 leading tacklers from a year ago. And as far as this matchup, this is another matchup this week where I am just going with the better quarterback, the quarterback I feel like I can trust more, and that's Devin Dampier. I'm still not sold on Nico Iamaleava. And also something I'm looking at is the coaching for this matchup. Kyle Whittingham is in his 21st season, while Deshaun Foster is only in his second season. And I think Utah definitely wins by more than 6 points. I think that Utah wins this game by at least 10 points. I think Utah, they win decently comfortably. As UCLA, the whole narrative for UCLA, what people talk about is how UCLA, they don't have fans show up to the games, and it's going to feel like a Utah home game. I got Utah winning this one. Concluding the Week 1 best of the rest, Virginia Tech and number 13 South Carolina, Sunday afternoon in Atlanta. Both teams with 12 returning starters from a year ago. As far as losses from last season, not only player-wise, but game-wise as well, Virginia Tech, 5 losses last season by 1 possession. Virginia Tech, they were competitive in their games last season, but 5 times they just couldn't get it done. South Carolina, 3 of their 4 losses last season by 1 possession. A 3-point loss to LSU, which was a very controversial game. Perhaps the most controversial game last season. A 2-point loss to Alabama. And if things go different in those 2 games, perhaps we're talking about South Carolina coming off of a playoff appearance. Both teams, they lost their starting running backs from last season. Virginia Tech losing Bashal Tutin. South Carolina losing Raheem Sanders. But South Carolina, they got positive news earlier this week. Utah State transfer running back Rashal Faison, his eligibility was approved. They also have senior running back Oscar Attaway in the backfield as well. He had about 300 rushing yards last season and 3 touchdowns. Virginia Tech lost their top 4 receivers from last season. South Carolina lost 6 of their top 7 tacklers from a year ago. And there is a lot of hype surrounding South Carolina this season. Quarterback Lenora Sellers is a candidate to win the Heisman, one of the Heisman favorites this season. Virginia Tech showed last season that they can be competitive in games, but can they again this season? I'm not going to call for them to make this a close game, but they could do it as we saw last season, any given Saturday. But I just think with this game being in Atlanta, South Carolina will be playing with a chip on their shoulder all season long, knowing how close they were to making the playoff. If a couple things went their way last season, they probably would have been in it. And I just think with this being in Atlanta, very similar to the Syracuse Tennessee matchup, I think South Carolina pulls away. They use the home crowd advantage in their favor. as Atlanta is SEC territory, I think South Carolina wins by at least 2 touchdowns. And that will do it for my week 1 best of the rest. Comment your predictions down below. Like, share, subscribe. Thank you for tuning in. Enjoy the games this weekend. Until next time, Vegas is always watching.